I think another important thing is to also, when you go to appointments, have a parent or somebody that you trust on the phone, on the speakerphone. My parents and people that I love can't make it to all my appointments, but even when you have that person on the speakerphone, doctors note that and they put it in the chart and they know that you're still supported, even if somebody isn't necessarily physically there with you.
This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions expressed in the podcast are not those of Hearts Unite the Globe, but of the hosts and guests, and are intended to spark discussion about issues pertaining to congenital heart disease or bereavement. And welcome to another live episode of Heart to Heart with Anna. I'm super excited to have quite a few amazing volunteers and patrons with us here today. So thank you all for joining us. And we are talking today about family dynamics and CHD, which is a fascinating topic to me because I wouldn't be here if my own child had not been born with a heart defect. I didn't even know that children had problems with their hearts. I knew they had problems with their ears because I was a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, but we kind of assumed the heart was okay. I am trying to see right now how, there we go. I can change the view to speaker. There we go. Family dynamics and CHD. I think since we are rather few in number, maybe we could take just a moment to go around and, if you don't mind, just saying your name. You don't have to give your last name if you don't want to, but your first name and how you're related to CHD, whether it's you or someone in your family. And I'm going to go by the order that I see the participants because I can't see everybody's face. So Ayrton, you're next.
I'm Ayrton, and I lost my brother when he was 19 to a undiagnosed heart defect. And I'm currently undergoing testing for own cardiac issues.
And Ayrton is a patron, a volunteer. She's been a guest, she's been a producer, scriptwriter, she does everything. So thank you for coming today. And mostly what she does is she works with the CHC podcast. So it's really a joy for me to have her here on Heart to Heart with Anna. So thanks, Ayrton.
Thank you for having me back.
Oh, I'm happy to have you back anytime. You have been on the show once. So, but you're a regular on the CHC podcast. We don't know what we would do without you. You're one of the core members. Okay, another return guest is Hope, and Hope is my daughter. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself real quick, though, and say what you want to say.
Hi, I'm Hope. I was the reason that the podcast and everything and all the books generally exist. I was born with a very complex heart condition that went through a number of different names, and it's currently single ventricle is the major diagnosis. I don't really participate a whole lot in the heart community. Mostly it's just times like this when I hop on episode.
We're always happy to have you on the episodes and taking part in the books and doing all the other things that I twist your arm into doing. Okay, Cindy, you're next on my list, and I know you're not on camera, and that's fine if you just want to say a little something about yourself to us.
I am Cindy, and I live in the barbecue capital of Texas in Lockhart. I was born with tetralogy of below, and this year I turned 70 years old, and I can't believe it.
I can't believe it either. You're so beautiful. You look great for your age. I hate it when people say that, right? Because now people are saying that to me. Oh, Anna, you look so good for your age. I guess we just need to take it as a compliment. So, yay.
Yes.
Yay. That 70 is a milestone for anybody, but somebody with a complex heart defect like you, it's even more to be celebrated. And Cindy has a really special story. Maybe you'll share it with us later about how her family celebrated this milestone birthday. But next, I will introduce my better half, Anna Jaworski. You're next on the list.
My name is Frank Jaworski, and I am Hope's father and Anna's husband. And much of my role in the Heart community consists of keeping Anna alive, making sure that she eats properly. Sometimes there's times I come home from work and she says, gee, I have a headache. She hasn't eaten or drank anything all day long. Goodness gracious, she's hard to take care of. But I am an enthusiastic part-time supporter of the congenital heart community, and I do what I can on any show that Anna asks me to be a part of. And I have been on every show I think that she has in some capacity or another. So I'm happy to be here today.
I think that's true, except I don't think you've been on Bereaved But Still Me yet. And you weren't
Really?
on Heart to Heart with Nicole and David.
I've lost
You are
both
the
parents and
president.
two older siblings, and I haven't been on the show yet. What's
I
wrong?
know. We need to have you on the show. That's
I
true.
think
We
so.
should have you on the show. Yes, absolutely. And Frank is also president of Hearts Unite the Globe, which is the nonprofit that pays for this podcast and all of the other podcasts that we just mentioned. Oh, you haven't been on Guerreros de Corazon. You're going to have to really bone up on your Spanish before you can go up there. I mean, it's
Okay.
cool, but it might
Well,
take a
possible.
little while. Okay. Yes. And so Frank volunteers all the time. He's been a guest host. He's been amazing. Been a guest multiple times, as has our next person, who is Lorrie Hill. Lorrie has been so busy since she got her heart transplant that we haven't seen her in a while. So I'm so happy that you're here today. Lorrie, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Lorrie. I was born with a complex single ventricle. And like Anna said, I have taken a bit of a step back from the heart community after transplant, especially in the last 2 years as I'm studying to become a physician assistant. But yeah, I'm happy to hop on for a show.
I'm just happy to see you're so pink and you look so good. You really look fabulous.
Thank you.
What a life-changing event. And now you are going to be a physician assistant and you'll be helping countless other children, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's the goal.
That is
Hopefully
awesome.
soon.
And last but far from least is Megan Tones, all the way from Australia. We have Scotland, and every place in between, it seems like. So, Megan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Megan Tones. I'm from Australia. I have a ventricular septal defect that has been a little bit complicated over the years. Had, I think, 4 heart surgeries, starting from when I was 4 months and the last one when I was 25. And I'm doing pretty well now, but I do have some heart failure and arrhythmias, and I've been on quite a few of Anna's shows and helped out with script writing over the years, probably for about the past 10 years or so, and helped out with the book also.
Yes, you
And
have been
I think-
amazing.
I think I'm the last one.
You are the last one. So we're ready to talk about family support. And I'd like to talk about some of the challenges that we have met regarding living with congenital heart disease. All right, Frank, do you want to go first, sweetie?
You want me to go first in what way?
These are all adults. We don't have any other parents. It's just you and me. We're the only parents here. But I'm really curious about how support has changed over the years, because I think support for parents versus support for adults with CHD is very different. Our child had 3 open heart surgeries, 2 as an infant, and then the last one as a teenager, but she was treated like an adult. And for me, that was much more challenging, the way that they treated us in the hospital. But I'd love to hear your perspective on that. And then I'd love to hear from all of these adults how they feel their support has changed over the years.
Well, support can mean a lot of different things. It can be your communication with your care team, understanding the things they're telling you and then being responsive to that. Support can be how your family treats you, how your family takes care of you. I think that my family was very intensively caring when Hope was going through her first 2 surgeries, but things have changed since then. For one thing, both my older siblings have passed away since then, so I don't have them to rely on in the same sense. And my father is gone too. He passed away since then. So that kind of family support I don't have. I think that the whole area of online support and social media It's interesting because I'm not involved in social media. I avoid it. I don't want to be on it. I do as little as I can. I have some professional stuff that I talk about and put out there, but not much. So I am happy to not be on social media. I know that sets me apart from a lot of other people. To be honest, my support comes from my wife, who I talk to about these kinds of things all the time. I think we've had decades of learning about this and dealing with the consequences. I don't think there's any possible consequence we haven't considered or talked about. I know that for people coming into the situation now, social media plays an enormous difference. They have a lot of access to people. I obviously be careful about who you're talking to because some people aren't what they say they are. But overall, I think it's more open. When Anna first started doing speeches and talking about this, she would say to people, "You are not alone." I think that some people today find that almost obvious because there's so many groups out there. But it's still possible to feel alone, still possible to feel lonely. So being reminded that you have support is a good thing.
That's a good point. Yeah, we've lost Susan, Jack, your dad, and my mom. So in the last 3 decades, there's been a lot of loss for us. And those were people who were very supportive of us when we were going through different things. Cindy, I'm really curious with you now that you're 70, you have 7 decades of experience living with a CHD. I imagine the support that you have had over the years has changed dramatically. First, starting out as a child, but then later having to negotiate all of your doctor's appointments and medications and everything yourself. Plus, you have a pretty complicated medical history. Do you mind sharing a little bit with us about how support has changed over the years for you?
Gosh, I don't even know where to start or what all to include, but being 70 now, I was born in 1955, so there wasn't a whole lot really going on or known for sure about CHD. I was born in Austin, Texas, which we had no pediatric cardiologist. And I wish I knew. I never asked my parents, and now my parents have been gone for a long time. But how did I get to Houston? So Texas Children's, did they take me in an ambulance? Did they take me in their car? I was blue when I was born. I think this is about my whole life, too. I wish I would have journaled and asked more questions. And I think back then you just didn't, well, I never thought about it. And I mean, we talked about it at home because I also had an older sister who had a heart defect. And hers was not as serious. She didn't have surgery as a young child, but we had plenty of heart casts at the same time in
Yeah.
Houston.
Mm.
And I do remember that. My sister died several years ago, my older sister. So it's just me and my one sister left. And I may cry. My sister has Alzheimer's.
Oh, I'm so
It's so-
sorry.
I feel like I've lost her also. Anyway, I have a wonderful husband and kids and grandkids. My first grandchild just graduated from high school, and I still can't believe it.
I love the photos you share on Facebook. Everybody looks so happy.
Oh, wow. It happens so fast, y'all. The people that are young, I mean, you hear old people say this all the time and you can't relate. But when you get here and your grandkids are all of a sudden leaving home and going to college, wow, that's been a long time.
So your support really changed from being your sister, who was a kindred spirit. She was also going through some of the same procedures that you were going through, even though she didn't require the open heart surgery like you. But then your parents as well, of course, and your younger sister, to now it's your husband, your children, and everybody else. Your support network has grown tremendously.
Yes, and they are all so good. Poor guys, they just show up in everything. And like you say, I've had my grandchildren in their sports activities. Those are like my doctor visits and my surgeries. Kids show up for everything. One time, actually, my husband didn't go with me, and my son took me, and my daughter came. So they're always there with me. A big thing with me is 20 years ago, I was diagnosed with sinus cancer. And it was very rare, very aggressive. And the life expectancy was 1 year. And I made it through that. It was hard, very, very hard. But then I had a period of time, a few years after that, where everything kind of evened out. And I even told my heart doctor, I said, I never thought my heart issue would be the least of my worries, because now that I've had a pulmonary valve replacement twice, my first surgery was when I was 3. I have some AFib, I have a defibrillator, pacemaker, but really my heart issues took a back seat to the cancer. Actually, next week I have an appointment in Houston. My electrophysiologist is in Houston. So I see him once a year, and I'll see him next week. And the next day I'll be at MD Anderson seeing them. Put them all together.
You keep people busy, Cindy.
Yeah,
And you keep trucking on. That's what amazes me, is that you always have such a positive attitude about everything. I think your attitude has helped carry you a long way.
That is a conscious decision, you know?
Absolutely.
I have lots of problems from my radiation and then my chemo, but I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus that saved me. And then I'm here. I got to see 3 grandchildren. I got to see my son graduate from the university and go to law school. You know, the song, Don't Worry, Be Happy.
I love that song.
I try
Absolutely.
to just don't worry and be happy. I have fun. I have a great time with my kids. I love my kids. One of the hardest things was I had to quit work as a registered nurse. And that was because of the problems stemming from the radiation affected my cognitive ability. I did cry a lot about that. That was hard.
Yeah. I can
But
imagine.
that's been about 7 or 8 years ago now. So anyway, I have a good life. I have a great family. And I just wish I knew more of the beginning and wish I had asked my parents more.
Well, I think that's a good takeaway for anybody who's listening to this. Make sure that you ask your parents while they're alive, because otherwise you may not get those answers.
Right.
So another person who is medically based right now is Lorrie. And I'm wondering, Lorrie, for you most recently, your support has probably changed some, because you went from being a regular CHDer to now a transplant recipient. Can you talk about how the support for you as a heart patient changed with those 2 major events?
Yeah, I think the transition between CHD and transplant is very much not quite the Wild West, but it's still very new. So when you're going for a transplant, there's either the option to do it at a pediatric hospital. There are still quite a few that'll transplant adult CHDers at the pediatric hospital, especially if they have an adult CHD program, or they'll try to transition you to an adult program so you can get your transplant there. And there's, of course, many centers around the country that kind of have both adult and pediatric under kind of the same roof in a way. Houston does not have that. And so I was transplanted at Texas Children's. I grew up at Texas Children's. I love Texas Children's. Like, even though I've had some awful experiences there, it's still one of my favorite places. And I love the care they provide. Even if it has changed over the years, I always felt very supported and cared for by a lot of the medical professionals there, and just the decision making that doctors and other providers make. Unfortunately, after I had my transplant, I no longer was an adult with CHD, so I could not stay at Texas Children's in the adult CHD
Oh.
program.
Really?
Right.
I
Yeah.
didn't realize that.
Yeah.
What a shock for
So
you.
I kind of knew it was coming, and my transplant team was very open with me about, hey, like, once you're transplanted and you're doing well, we're not going to be super eager to kick you out the door, but we're going to start getting some pushback for keeping you here. So I transitioned to an adult transplant center about 2.5 years after, and it was a completely different world. Completely different world. I went to an adult transplant center, somewhat affiliated with TCH, but not really. And the level of care there was not even close to what I found at TCH. I'm so glad that I have not had to be inpatient as an adult yet after transplant at an adult center. But yeah, you have to very much be your own advocate at an adult transplant center. And I feel like sometimes maybe if I were to have switched to ACHD sooner, because I never really went into the ACHD program at Texas Children's, like my pediatric cardiologist really wanted to hold on to me, and we all kind of had a feeling that transplant was coming. That she didn't want to get rid of me and then gonna send me to adult, and once I was in the adult program, were they going to transplant me there? Were they going to send me out? She felt like if she held on to me, there would have been a higher likelihood that I would have my transplant in Texas. So that's what we decided to do. Yeah.
Well, it's
So
nice that she really took you under her wing, Lorrie.
yeah, she was incredible. What was really special is she and actually a lot of the transplant team at Texas Children came to my white coat ceremony about a year ago. And so that's just kind of like the level that they, they
Amazing
feed into their
support.
patients' lives. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
support.
amazing support.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not just your medical health, but also who you are as an individual.
Right, right. And so I'm still on the search to find a team that's somewhat close to what I had there, and I'm actually in the process of switching transplant teams again. So yeah, the goal is to find providers that care about you and want you to keep living your best life.
So, how hard has it been for you to go from being a kid with a CHD, where your parents provided probably a lot of the support for you? And obviously, TCH has been amazing for you, Lorrie. But
Yeah.
now an adult and you don't live in the same town as your
Nope.
parents, how
Nope.
difficult has that been not having that parental support that you had for so long? I'm sure you probably still do have it, but I'm sure it's
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah. In a way, I'm glad that my parents did that, but they kind of handed me the reins a little early. I coordinated my whole third open heart surgery on my own while I was in college. AKA, I like made all the phone calls to the hospital for scheduling and to insurance to make sure stuff was covered and all of that. I would literally sit on the steps of our college library and make phone calls between classes. And even before that, they made sure that I was the one going up to the desk and sending them my insurance card and stuff like that. So I do think having parents not coddle the kids, but teach them what their heart defect is and what it means for their life and how to start doing the things that you have to do when you're a heart patient. I was calling in to refill my own medications when I was like 10 or 11. So I think starting young helps kids help support themselves with a little bit of a safety net underneath them so that when they are an adult and the safety net is a little bit looser, they can thrive on their own and make all the appointments and help make decisions and stuff like that. But I think another important thing is to also, when you go to appointments, have a parent or somebody that you trust on the phone, on the speakerphone. My parents and people that I love can't make it to all my appointments, but even when you have that person on the speakerphone, doctors note that and they put it in the chart and they know that you're still supported, even if somebody isn't necessarily physically there with you.
And that kind of support is really important. I always
Mhm.
feel when I'm going to an appointment where something may be discussed that may be unpleasant or maybe scary for me. For example, I had a car accident and we discovered that I had nodules in my thyroid, and that was scary for me. And my sister went to that appointment with me. I wanted somebody else there because it's really easy to go into shock when you're being told, I'm sorry, you may have thyroid cancer and we may have to do this or that with you. It really helps to have that other person who is a little bit detached. I mean, of course, she was my sister. She loves me, but
Yeah.
she wasn't the one at that time who was having to go through it and she could hear what the doctor had to say. So I think it's good to
Yeah.
have, even if you can do it on the phone. I'm impressed that the doctors let you do that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if they tell you no, then that's wrong.
Well, I saw
Oh,
it in our clinic, they say no cell phone usage. So, I mean,
well,
when they don't want you to have the cell phone, and I get it because some people will sit there with the doctor there and be talking about something that has nothing to do with what's going on. That's an abuse. Excuse me. But if you say, well, I want my mom to be here, I want my mom to be able to listen and she can't be here physically, I would like to think that doctors would be open to that.
yeah. If you approach it that way, they're way more likely to say, oh, yes, let's stop. Let's call your person. I know, of course, I'm only a baby provider. I've only seen over 200 patients at this point, but the number of people that have been on their phones that are not talking to another loved one or somebody else who can be that second front of ears has been, I mean, I can only count them on one hand. So even though it seems like a lot of people would abuse it, I think providers should definitely be more open to letting people use their phone to either record the conversation or call somebody so that you can have that second set of ears.
And that's another good point that sometimes you can't have the support physically. Your loved ones have to work, they're not available to come or whatever. But if you can record it, then you can have that later for yourself too, to go back and listen, especially if it's changes in medication, potential surgeries coming up, or placement of devices. It's easy to get overwhelmed. At least it is for me. Megan, how
Yeah.
do you feel about that in Australia? Do you have the same kind of setup as what Lori's talking about?
Yeah, usually people are advised to bring a support person to appointment with them, or a caregiver is expected to come to the appointment with them. But even as an adult, they don't really send appointment letters out anymore, but I'm pretty sure they always used to say that you're allowed to bring a support person. I think that the only time there was any variation to that was probably during COVID, but even then there were stories about people would have an appointment and they'd maybe have someone on their phone listening in if they weren't physically allowed to be in the room.
Yeah, I think that kind of support is just so critical. Welcome to Annie Ulchak. She joined us a little bit late, but Annie, do you want to stop for a moment and introduce yourself to us?
Hi, I'm Annie Ulchak. I'm a 46-year-old single ventricle HLHS, and I volunteer on the CHD podcast with Anna. And I also see Ayrton and Frank, our honorary member that comes on all the time. It's great to see you guys. Hi, Megan, Hope, Lorrie, and Cindy. So that is me.
We're talking about CHD and family dynamics, and we started by talking about the family support challenges and communication. Cindy just turned 70. So, talking about 7 decades of support and how her support has changed over time. And I wonder if anybody else has anything they want to add to that. If you don't mind, Ayrton, I'm going to put you on the spot real quick because I was listening to some reels that you had put together on YouTube. And we were talking in those reels about how support for bereaved siblings has been a real issue and hasn't been something that has been addressed as well as we think it should. Would you mind addressing that?
Yeah, I mean, I was only 15 when I lost my brother. He was 19. And we didn't have any warning at all that he was going to pass. And the only support I had at the time was the school counselor. There was no other input at all, nothing at all from doctors to see how I was doing mentally. Obviously, my parents weren't in the frame of mind to make sure I was doing okay.
They were probably grief-stricken themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a lot of support out there for the bereaved parents, but nothing at all for bereaved siblings.
Did the counselor have you come in her office and talk to you about what had happened?
Yeah, especially after we'd been to the coroner's inquest, because that happened either on the day of or the day after my 16th birthday.
Oh, wow. I'm impressed that the school counselor was sensitive to that and had you come in so that she could talk to you about it.
The school nurse was actually a friend of the family, so I think she might have pulled a few strings there.
Yeah. Yeah. That was observant of her because, like you said, it doesn't seem like there are a whole lot of people who are attuned to that. I don't think it's that people don't care. I think it's that, first of all, I think people don't know what to say. But secondly, I think that so many people are attuned to the other things like the parents and the service that's going on, if there's a religious service or the burial service that's going on, and not necessarily to the siblings and how they're doing.
We'd just been to my oldest brother's wedding less than 2 weeks before Edward passed away. So my brother was still on his honeymoon when Edward died.
Wow. That's
So
a
my
lot to
brother
deal
and
with.
sister-in-law had to come back from the honeymoon all bright-eyed and really happy to be met at the airport. I think her dad met them at the airport. And this have to get dumped on them.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that because I know it's difficult to talk about sometimes, but I'm hoping that by talking about it here and on the CHC podcast that it gives other people who are in that same situation an opportunity to know they're not alone. And maybe just now you gave them some options of resources that they might seek out, like the school nurse or the school counselor, because I imagine most kids wouldn't even know where to turn.
No, I wouldn't have known where to go to find someone to talk to outside of my family.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if some kids, especially teenagers, would feel reticent to talk to their parents when they know that their parents are grieving, even though they're hurting too.
Yeah, I always felt like I was one that had to be strong for my parents.
I believe that about you. Now that you're the one who potentially has a heart condition, well, you do have a heart condition. We just don't know all the ins and outs of it.
Yeah.
How do you feel that your support has changed?
Well, like Lorrie, I don't live near my family anymore.
Mhm.
So I don't have someone who can come to my appointments with me. And I try explaining things to my mum, and she doesn't always fully understand the medical side of things.
Yeah, well, especially with you, you're really complex.
Yeah.
You're not easy to understand.
And it's like I can't have her on the phone calls because she's going deaf and she doesn't understand the Scottish accent.
Oh, wow. And you're in Scotland.
Yeah.
So all of your doctors have a Scottish accent.
The vast majority of them do, yeah. And so that makes things even more complicated.
Absolutely. So where do you feel you get the support that you need to keep moving forward? Because you have a really positive outlook on things and you appear to be so strong and such a great self-advocate.
I've had to learn how to be a self-advocate because amount of time I've spent since I was a teenager fighting against doctors just to get listened to. And I have a support worker who will come with me to hospital appointments if they fall on our meeting times. So I'm not always going alone. And I have you and Frank.
You do. We're
and Annie.
family now.
Yes, we are.
I love that. Let's go on to the next question. I can't believe how much time has gone by already. The time always flies when I'm with you guys because I have such a good time talking to all of you. I am wondering about coping strategies. And this is very interesting. I'm talking about right now because I'm getting ready to release an episode that Megan was a producer for. It's an interview with Elle Pendrick. And we talked about what her life has been like. She was born the same year Megan was, and also in Australia. It's a fascinating conversation. But she talked a little bit about coping strategies in that episode. And I'm curious some of the strategies you found. Hope had her hand raised and then she took it down. Okay, if you don't want to answer that, go ahead and say what you wanted to say, and then we'll go on to talking about the coping strategies. Hope.
It wasn't much. It was just, for me, the most recent change is I started dating someone pretty seriously. And she asked me first what social media and such that I use for keeping up to date with art communities and the like. When I told her I don't really do any of that, she talked to mom and asked questions about what she should know and what she should look out for. And so that's been the biggest change in support I've seen lately, is having someone who lives with me now, and she's very much stepped up to keep an eye on things and make sure that I'm doing okay.
Yeah, she was amazing. We went out to dinner together and she was just very upfront and said, Hope said that I should ask you some questions. And she did.
Does not
And
beat around the bush.
he did not beat around a bush at all. We got straight into it, which was really lovely. She seemed prepared to entertain some of the things that I was going to tell her. She didn't seem shocked or surprised by what I told her. And in fact, I could tell she had done some of her own research, and she's been helping us with the Discord channel. So she has had a chance to hear some of the other interviews and other people's stories. And she came at it with such a loving heart that it makes me feel really good to know that Hope has somebody living with her who has her back and who I know she'll call me if, and she has called me whenever she's worried. Oh, she takes no time to get on the phone and let me know she's worried. So it's nice because the plants that I gave Hope could not do that. And that was the only other living thing.
Barely keep them alive.
I know. I have to keep reminding you to water the plants. Okay. So going back to coping strategies, and Hope, since I have you on right now, let's talk about some coping strategies because you were an infant when you had your first two surgeries. You don't really remember having to cope with that. You were a baby and you don't really have the cognitive abilities that you do when you're a teenager, which is what you were when you had your third open heart surgery. How do you feel you were able to cope with this stress? And for those who are listening who don't know, Hope was in the hospital for 26 days post-Fontan revision because of pleural effusions. And that was a really difficult thing for Frank and me to have to watch her go through, but it was much harder for you in some ways to go through it because there was nothing you could do that would make it stop. And
Yeah.
I know it was really disappointing.
I don't even know at this point. That was, I hate saying this, that was over a decade ago.
Can't be that old. You're my child.
No. Yes, you're 1-year-old. It's so weird to think I'm 11 years old. That seems wrong. For coping strategies, I remember I had recently gotten my tablet at that time. So I played a lot of games on there. Did a little bit of typing and writing down story ideas.
Watched movies. We watched a lot of
Not a
movies.
lot of that. Not a lot of that. I remember. Maybe like the TV was on a decent amount, but I was not paying much attention. The only one I distinctly recall was we watched the Karate Kid, the new one with Jackie Chan. That's the only movie I remember watching at that time.
Well, you went to the Child Life and watched Pirates of the Caribbean with the
That's
other
right. Yes, with
patients.
Clay. Is that right?
With what?
Was his name Clay?
I don't remember. I think so. The
Oh
one that
gosh.
was
In the
and
Halo,
had the
right?
halo. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, it's so terrible. I don't remember his name. That was so long ago. But yes, the nurses did arrange that for us to have that day to go. They made us popcorn. We got to just hang out and watch a movie together. And it was a very fun time. That was great, having that little escape, I guess. But for the most part, I remember playing around on my tablet. And yeah, it was so long ago. It's hard to remember day to day what I did to get through all of it.
Yeah. I remember taking a lot of walks because we knew that just sitting still or laying in the bed could potentially cause pneumonia. And so we wanted you to get up and walk. And you weren't real happy with us at first when we did that. But we all walked together. And I think that was healing for me to see you getting up and moving around. Even though I knew it hurt you some, I could see you getting stronger day by day. And dealing with the disappointment, for me, I think one of the things that helped was we were really open with each other. And I remember there was one point where we thought the pleural effusions had stopped, and they came and they put some TPN in your line, and the fluid just gushed out. So we knew that the line was not going to be pulled. And you started to cry, and I cried. I wanted to be strong for you, but I thought, "Oh my gosh, if I can't cry when I see my kid being this disappointed, there's probably something wrong with me." And we just held each other and cried for a few minutes, and then we pulled ourselves together and we were like, "Okay, we have to power through it." But for me, I felt it was important for me to be there for you and to let you know that it was okay for you to cry, and I was disappointed for you too, and we were gonna make it somehow anyway. I think Annie has a coping strategy. Would you like to talk to us about some of your coping strategies, Annie?
Yeah, yes. So, well, during COVID, that my PCP decided to do with patients who have different health challenges. So it was all different spectrums of what we had. They taught us a lot of different coping strategies. And I believe in one of the CHD podcasts, we talked about it. It was called CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy. And what they did with that was they had us go through some of our hardest times to be able to verbalize it, which I won't deny, it can be very difficult, even after all these years. I unfortunately remember a lot of my post-Fontan surgery stuff. Similar to Hope, my lungs just kept filling up again and again and again around my lungs with the fluid. And I was in the hospital for 28 days. Then as a 7.5-year-old, the ability for coping strategies back then was just watching the TV and numbing your brain because there really wasn't anything else to talk about it. Like, oh, when you get to a certain point, you go into the crying mode and you try your best not to because you're supposed to be strong. I know it can feel like it's a lot. But with the CBT, I was trained in how to find a happy place. And I know in some ways people don't really get or understand that, but when you are properly taught, it really can be something to help you internally and mentally manage what's going on and process things a lot easier as well. I know I tend to use that and talking to myself. I just usually have to tell the medical community or whoever's around me, I'm not upset. I'm not going to freak out. I'm just talking to my body to prepare for whatever's about to happen so that I can adjust myself properly and ask questions that maybe I wasn't thinking about. And all of a sudden they just start coming out. And so those are just some of my coping strategies.
I love that. That's really, really helpful. Yeah, for me, prayer was a big part of it. And I even sent Frank home. Sorry about this, honey. But when we were in San Antonio and things were looking so dire, I said to him, I need you to go home and get my Bible. I have to have it. Not that I could focus and read it, but I just needed to hold it. I already had my rosary in my purse. So I had that as well. And for me, those helped me during some of the darkest hours because I knew control is an illusion. I wasn't really in control. Only God was in control. And when I could give it up to God, it wasn't easy because I'm kind of a control freak. Hope is smiling. She's like, oh, yeah. But I knew that ultimately I just had to pray for wisdom and guidance, and that I would be the mother that Hope needed me to be, and I would be the mother that Joey needed me to be, and the wife that Frank needed me to be at that time. So thank you for sharing that, Anne. That's really helpful. I think we all need that kind of training because we all go through things. I just broke my wrist, and thank goodness Hope was there. She could go with me to the hospital and help me take care of that because that was a really challenging experience for me. And I think as humans, we go through difficult times where things don't go the way they were planned, and it helps to have some coping strategies. Lorrie said she feels like she talked a lot about her coping strategies in some of the other Heart to Heart with Anna episodes, but that interacting with patients going through similar experiences on social media and staying busy are major coping strategies for her. I think that is where people today are so lucky. Don't you all? Because 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 70 years ago, that just wasn't even available. And we do have social media opportunities now that can make us recognize that we're not alone. People sharing stories can be so comforting, and it's amazing what we can learn just in sharing stories, which is why I have this podcast. So thank you today for all of you who took an hour out of your busy schedule to be on this live show. I love all of you, my patrons, my volunteers, my dear friends and family. I love you all, and I hope everybody who listens to this will enjoy it as much as I enjoyed talking with everybody. Have a great day, and that concludes this episode of Heart to Heart with Anna.
Thank you again for joining us this week. We hope you have become inspired and empowered to become an advocate for the congenital heart community. Heart to Heart with Anna with your host, Anna Jaworski, can be heard at any time wherever you get your podcasts. A new episode is released every Tuesday from noon Eastern Time.